Welcome to M&A Unpacked, the weekly show where we bring on experts in MSP M&A, case studies from those who have gone through or are going through the process, and top M&A and business minds to help you maximize the value of your MSP, whether you're buying, selling, or just trying to improve your business. Make sure to subscribe to the Kaseya YouTube channel so you know when new episodes drop. You can even save the M&A Unpacked playlist for easy access. Today, I am joined by Jason Yeomans, Managing Director of Iglu Tech Group. So Jason has an interesting story. He was a professional motorsport or driver. He was in a professional motorsport career and shifted to becoming a very successful business leader in the telecom and managed services industry. Background in sales and a real knack for acquisitions. Very excited to have you here today, Jason, to share. And I got to start by, asking you, well, first of all, let's back up. Where are you? Where's your MSP? And just kind of tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Great to be here. Really good to talk to you today. So we're based in the UK, City of London. I'm not in the City of London right now. You can probably just about discern some posters on the wall behind me. I'm in my office / son's playroom. So yeah, it's not exactly a corporate environment, but it's whatever works really. That's the way the world goes. So yeah, we're based in the City of London. And as you so rightly say, I'm fairly new to the managed services side of things, having been in business and telecoms previously, and a checkered career, shall we say, in motorsport before that.
Yeah, I have to ask you about your motorsport career. That's very interesting. Can tell us all about that? Like, how did you, what were you doing? How was that? How did you transition out of it, like into MSP or into the telecom space?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story, really. I come from I'm Scottish. I come from a part of Scotland where a lot of racing drivers come from. And it's a small town, and typically our fathers knew each other, and that's how I sort of got into it, more by accident than by design, really. But I was able to be relatively quick and able to create a career out of it in sort of sports cars, most latterly. I never made it to Formula One. I wasn't that good. I would still have you believe that I can hold my own over a single lap, but we had a company karting day a couple of weeks ago, and I just couldn't bring myself to let anybody else win. So I went out and won. But occasionally you got to keep proving to yourself that you still got it. But essentially, I ran out of talent. To be honest, I became older, and my eyesight started to go and things like that. So I'd always been involved in my father's businesses, very, very close to my father. And when he was running his business, I would sit in on meetings. If I wasn't racing, then I would go to meetings with his accountants, meetings with his lawyers. And I was probably doing this from sort of age 16. So I just sit there and, I liked hanging out with my dad. So, and I just sort of, through osmosis, I guess, learn about all these different aspects. When I finally stopped racing, I tried a few different jobs and things like that. I never made enough money in racing to sort of rest on my laurels. And to be fair, I was only sort of in my late 20s, early 30s. So I wasn't really old. And I needed to do something else. So I was looking for something that kind of gave that buzz. And a lot of people say, well, surely there's nothing in business that can give you a buzz like racing, but you'd be surprised. And I think that's probably why telecoms tech is exciting to me, because it's very fast paced. It's very dynamic. Things change a lot really quickly. You have to make decisions quickly. And it's also definitely why M&A appeals to me, because M&A is risky, right? There's so many things can go wrong, and the exposure for everybody that's involved in it can be really quite costly. So I quite like that, perversely, I guess. But that's what really gets me going is that sort of risk and rolling the dice and looking at what we can do with opportunities, which essentially what racing is. There's an opportunity in front of you. You make a decision, and then you either come out the back of that or you don't. So yeah, that's kind of the long and short of it, I guess.
Interesting. And sports, having an experience in sports, just like in the military, it brings a rare set of skills to business, I think. There's a lot of lessons from sports that translate over.
Yeah, there are, we've spoken about this before, you and I. Sports a great metaphor for business. That particularly, when you think about, what it is, why does a business do what it does, right? And I'm a great believer in you explain to people why you're doing something, why you're making a decision, because then everybody can live in the light and not in the dark, and they can understand and apply their own personality or decision-making prowess, or even just learn from something. But I think if people understand why something's being done, it makes a lot of sense. Now, if you think about sports, everybody involved with the sports team understands why they're there, what the goal is, and what their part is within that goal. So if you're a football team, the physiotherapist knows what their job is, right? The manager knows his job, the defender, the goalkeeper, the subs, the water guy, whatever it might be. Everybody understands. But in business, if you think about it, I don't think there's a lot of people that truly understand why they're there. They go for a paycheck and all the rest of it, and they do the 9 to 5 or whatever else. But do they truly understand what value they're adding? Not necessarily to the business, but to the people whom they service. And the people whom we service in business are kind of like the audience in sports. Okay, slightly probably not a direct relationship there, but there is, because you're ultimately you're aiming to please your fans and you're aiming to please your customers. So I think that's there's a lot of transferable skills from sport. I myself think that the biggest thing I learned, other than being like uber competitive, is the ability to understand why somebody does something, why somebody might not want to do something, and ultimately why you're all there, and what you can achieve as a collective. It's that teamwork and that cohesion between disparate people that ultimately makes teamwork. Disparate people that work together create a team, and that's what we're all trying to achieve in business.
Yeah, and the stakes are much higher probably when you're driving a car at a fast rate of speed. You got to depend on those team members that were working on your car, right?
Yeah,
Put a
yeah.
make sure the wheel is on before you go around
Yeah,
a corner.
and it's such a good point that you raised there, because in that scenario you trust those guys implicitly. Like, I mean, my race engineers and my race mechanics, I have a deep love for those guys, and I've worked with loads of different engineers, but there's a real connection between you, and you see it when you watch F1 or anything like that, and the drivers are talking to their engineers. There's more than, and there's a lot of things in the news just now about Max Verstappen getting into some hot water because people felt like he was abusive to his engineer, and it's not as simple as that. It's not just well, you're my engineer and you're the driver. These guys have worked together and been through emotional roller coasters so often that those things are so incredibly important, and that there's having that implicit trust of people in your team, I think, is absolutely key, and that transfers to business.
No doubt. Okay, so your original ventures were in the telecom industry, and I know you'd mentioned it to me in our last conversation. It's a highly commoditized area. How did you manage to stand out and achieve growth in such a competitive market?
Um, Pig-headedness, I think. We were brutal when it came to growth. It was literally, my saying is, if in doubt, flat out, right? And in telcos, it's such a very, very sales focused environment. It's improved now, and actually it's not improved. That's the wrong word to use. It's changed. It's evolved. But back in the day when I was involved, I'm going back sort of 10, 15, 17 years ish when I first got into it. It was literally very transactional, very price led. But because it was price led, if you had a bit of something about you, and I wasn't the only one, you could make a difference. So if we pushed harder and faster and more consistently than everybody else, then we grew. You know, we went from sort of 2 people to, well, 92 people in 6 years, but we sort of, in the first few years, we just kept doubling in size. And then, you know, one year we sort of almost quadrupled in size. I was a lot younger then. I didn't have a family. I had no responsibilities. You know, I just literally worked my backside off. And honestly, there's no magic sauce other than just, you know, go for it, really.
Interesting. How did you get from telecom to diversify into IT and managed services? I mean, did you switch, or was that an evolution? Tell us about
Yeah,
that.
it ended up being a switch, but it started out being an evolution. So with the telecoms world, it was very clear it was kind of a race to the bottom. I feel like the only people that were making really good money were the networks, and my business was in mobile telecoms, which is very transactional and very commoditized, and is literally, particularly in the UK. You know, I've spoken to people in industries, mobile telecom industries around the world, and the UK doesn't quite compare to anywhere else. You know, there's a lot is there's a lot of the contract values are given in cashbacks and asset value to the customer, so the margins are really, really thin. And where ultimately you win out in telecoms is it's quite a big cash cow. So you need a lot of scale to make it work, because you're only making, you know, small percentage points. So I took a view that, you know, we wanted to diversify that revenue and try and build in more of a value proposition, rather than just being either the fastest, you know, the most aggressive from a sales perspective, or the cheapest. So we started to diversify and look at how we could provide managed services, and we created a managed services wrap around our telecoms offering. And that went down quite well, and that definitely helped us win some bigger customers, for sure. But then we took the view that we were going to start selling IT managed services into that customer base. You know, we had thousands and thousands of customers. We're a big organization. We were, you know, one of the biggest in the UK at the time. So we took that view, and you know, I sat down with my sales team, 40 odd salespeople, and said, "This is what we're going to do." And they all went, "Wow, this is brilliant. We love this," because obviously they think better conversations with the customer, and you know, more commission for them, essentially. So that was one thing. But then when they went to market, they didn't really have those conversations, because when they did have those conversations, the customer went, "Well, you know, we just buy on price from you. We don't really care who you are." You know, so it was very difficult. So I kind of misread that situation, and that proved to be difficult. So I decided, for a variety of reasons, one of those being the one I've just mentioned, to exit that business and to go again, but on a managed services journey. So we actually set up a business that was providing digital transformation solutions. And we did that because, again, I didn't want to just be another person having another managed services conversation. So we build lots of different solutions into the Microsoft Cloud, applications, digital transformation solutions, business process automation, that kind of stuff. And as we were doing that, we started to be asked to do the managed services side of things. Hey, can you do this? Can you look after this? Can you look after that? Can you do our connectivity? All this kind of stuff. So we kind of accidentally fell into that side of things. We always knew it was a potential, but that's the way that we went. And then I made a decision that, you know, really, I think as probably anybody watching will attest to, one of the most difficult things is new business, true new logo business. So I thought, well, you know, if we go out and we acquire a really good managed services business, or managed services businesses, then we create a captive audience in which we can sell our solutions. And that really is the journey, you know. So it went from, you know, being sort of deliberate to being accidental to being sort of quite deliberate again. And you know, we're a couple of transactions in, and we're still going strong, really. So and now I love the MSP world. It's great.
And when was your first acquisition?
So in my previous business, I made about 7 or 8 acquisitions during that time, and we did them all pretty quickly. They were all telecoms businesses. But we made our first MSP related acquisition 2 years ago, literally 2 years ago. And that's when we acquired Guidance Technologies, which is a city-based MSP, really, really great business. Great culture, great founders, both of whom still work with us. One's our Chief Revenue Officer, and the other one's our CTO. So these guys are very much part of the fabric now of the business at group level, which is brilliant. But it's just a cracking business, brilliant customer base, just really, really great. And you know, the interesting thing about that business is that of the two founders, one is very technical and the other one is technical but more commercial. And that's how I think they built such a good business, which, to be honest, really kind of outstripped a lot of other MSPs at the time. So it was very impressive.
What were some of the biggest challenges you faced during that acquisition, maybe subsequent acquisitions? I mean, you came to it from a bit of acquisition experience doing
Yeah.
7 in the telecom industry. So this was not new to you by the time you got into the MSP. But if you talk, if you can share any challenges you faced, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, the biggest challenge is always people, good or bad, because typically what happens is we do an acquisition, then you do an announcement, and the vendors go, "Hey, we're selling, and we love you all, but we're off," and we go, "Hey, we're the new people, and we're really trustworthy, and please love us." And everybody tends to go, "Yeah, wow, this is really exciting," right? But then a few days pass, and everybody starts getting quite nervy. And what we never want to happen is that when we make an acquisition, we never want to destroy that business. We always want to keep that business going. All we want to do is kind of give it a shot in the arm and go, "We're going to go faster, and we're going to go in a slightly different direction." But that direction typically is like I always talk about it as like a narrowing of the arrowhead. If you imagine everyone's quite disparate, they're kind of all at 6s and 7s. We think we've got a really strong company culture. We want to pull everybody together. We start with why. We tell them why we're doing it. We tell them what's in it for them. And we hope they'll join us on that journey. But if they don't, then that's fine as well. So it's like, imagine that arrow tip, and the narrower and more focused that gets, then the faster it goes. And that's kind of the analogy I use with everybody. But so that's always a challenge, making sure that everybody feels seen and heard and valued, and it doesn't just become about shareholder value, which of course is very important. But the engineers on the ground, they don't care about shareholder value. They care about how much you're paying them and how hard they're working, and how nice customers are being to them. And if the company's doing something wrong and causing customers to be upset, then you need to address that. So that's one challenge. The other challenge is, well, we've always done it that way, school of thought, but again, that comes back to people. So again, we look at the processes and say, well, these are why we're changing the processes, and this is why this feels like it might be more complicated, but actually in the long run will help. So I mentioned before that we use a lot of automation. We sell automation solutions to our customers, but we use it ourselves as well, because we like to approach it that if we've got tech, let's leverage the tech and get it doing cool stuff, so that the humans can be humans. So the humans can spend more time talking to the customer rather than filling in a spreadsheet. And that's we're constantly looking for that all the time. Where are our marginal gains? Where can we get slightly better, 1%, 2% here? You bundle all that together, and you've got a 5 to 10% growth. And that actually is something that I'm probably a massive pain in the backside about that, because I never stop going on about it. Because everyone will go, right, we've got all the quick wins. And I'm like, yeah, but what about the long tail? What about the stuff that we've not done? Looking at Pareto's law and all these things. If you convert X% of your base, you've probably got the low-hanging fruit. What about that big long tail? What are you going to do with those guys? You're just going to bounce on to the next one, or you're going to actually pay some attention to that? So we'll look at those marginal gains. And again, that's a racing thing, right? If we can find a 10th, if we can find it on a 10-corner circuit, if I can find a 10th in every corner, then I've gone just over a second quicker, for a lap, and that's really important as well. These kinds of things. So there's always a challenge with people and processes, but ultimately preparation. I've got a little anecdote. I'm not going to say it now because it uses a naughty word, but preparation prevents poor performance, right? And that's what it is. It's about thinking ahead, thinking about what you've got going on, thinking about where it might fall over. Think about your end game and work backwards. That's typically what I do. And I've got some funny stories I can tell about. And by the way, actually, I make mistakes all the time. I'm regularly get it wrong. But we have a bit of a culture where we're dynamic enough to change things, and hopefully we're all big enough and ugly enough to admit when we've made a mistake and take it on the chin and move on. And ultimately, we learn from our mistakes. So that's the key, really. I'll probably end up babbling on about it because I could talk about it till the cows come home, but it's quite important to me.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. It sounds like you approach this from a real business and systems perspective here. You really worked on your business to get things right. And I don't say that. A lot of MSPs, when they get into the business, they get in because they're technicians. That's what they did, and they start an MSP. You didn't approach it from that way, and you really. It sounds like you really worked through defining how to run your business.
Yeah, it's such an interesting one, because I have a battle constantly where I go, oh, we could be better, or I could be better, or oh my God, I've messed that up, and I'm really hard on myself. But I guess I've made loads of mistakes, and I think that's probably the easiest way to summarize is I've made loads, thousands of mistakes, all the time, either in business or as a parent or whatever, and I'm constantly learning from mistakes, and in the racing world, when you make a mistake, if you don't learn from it, then it's costly when you make mistakes. So if you don't learn from it, you're not going to be an attractive proposition for a race team to sign. So you've got to deal with those things. You've got to go, right, and you've got to be really honest with yourself and go, well, what did I do wrong and what could I have done better? And I find that if you hold yourself to account in that way and very openly, then it creates a forum where people go, well, actually, it's all right to do this now. If you put your hand up and go, hey, guys, I messed up really badly. Sorry, let's fix it. And let's come back and think about why it happened, but let's fix it and let's move on and let's make sure it doesn't happen again. Let's turn it into a positive, And so when we did the guidance deal, Matt and Gary, who founded that business, and as I say, who still work with us now, one of the reasons they wanted to sell is they were working to midnight almost every night. They were so busy, and I said, right, well, we'll change that on day one, and we did. So we pulled them out of the roles and we put them into different roles. And I wrongly assumed that all the processes that were in that business were defined and documented. What I realized in a relatively short space of time, because I was like, why are things going wrong? What's going on here? And I realized that when I pulled Gary and Matt out of those roles, they were kind of like these integral links in each of those processes, which is why they were so busy till like 12 o'clock at night. And because they were asking question, answer question, left, right, and center, fielding questions, so they couldn't get their own things done. So I said, right, what we're going to do, this was at the tail end of 2022. I said, we're going to spend 2023 defining and documenting every single one of our processes. Because if we get the foundation right, and we spend a bit of time to get the foundation right, then we can move much faster. So we're actually better to go, whoa, brakes on, fix it, and then let's go faster. And again, maybe it's a racing thing where, you can't drive a bad car fast, right? But you can drive a really good car really, really fast. And that's the kind of logic, I suppose, is I wanted to get the business to a point where we could drive it as hard as we wanted to, but it didn't feel that hard. It felt easy because everything was there. And if somebody goes off on holiday, they can go off on holiday and they can enjoy themselves and they can come back and the world's not falling apart. Because we've got an exec team, we've got a management layer, we've got that structure in there. So, and honestly, it's one of those journeys that never ends. It never ever ends, and you're constantly doing it, and you're constantly dealing with people. And as much as that drives me mad, I kind of love it at the same time, you know, because it's just part of life, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Very interesting. I love the approach. And you know, we hear that all the time. The folks who kind of have processes and systems in place so that anybody can do what anybody else can do.
Yeah.
They just do it better.
Yeah, and you know what? You got to take a step back to take two steps forward, and that's the thing. People go, "Oh, I don't want to change things. I've always done it this way," and it's like, come on, then. You know, that's a perfect reason. Let's at least look at it. Let's see what we could do. You know, and then you get it going, and people are like, "Wow, this is great." You know, they love it.
Yeah, and this is why I think, you know, and I don't know about you, but we haven't talked about if you're in a peer group or not, but the peer group is just such an important thing, being part of an organization that helps you work on your business. Like you have said that, you know, instead of working in your business, work on your business. So important to do that.
It,
It's daunting, but
it is.
if you can do it and figure out how to do it, it just saves you so much.
It does. You know, and I think because I'm not, you know, everybody laughs at me, right, in the business because you know, I swear of all of us, I'm probably one of the least technical. And they always say, don't ask Jason how to fix it, because I just say, do a hard reset, which essentially means switch it off and back on again, right?
Right.
And I'm like, but every time they say that, I'm like, how many times does it work? And more often than not, it does work. Obviously, they don't let me near any of the really clever stuff. But not being a technologist means that I don't get distracted with that stuff. I'm like, okay, guys, this sounds great, but what can it do for the customers? How easily is it for us to sell it? Is it a one-off or can we sell it multiple times? You know, what can we do with it? And what change is it really going to bring? You know, don't talk to the customer. And that's that curse of knowledge that, you know, I've mentioned before, and that curse of expertise. If you know too much about something, you bore the pants off people about it. You know, they're not interested. They're interested in their journey and the challenges they're facing. What your job is to tell them why your tech is going to fix that for them. You know, not tell them what the tech does. They don't care, and neither do I. You know.
Right. Yeah, everybody cares about the end result. Very good advice. And you mentioned that Iglu Tech Group uses data to drive your decision making and improve efficiency. Love for you to talk about, you know, how the approach has impacted the business operations and customer satisfaction, and maybe a couple of examples of a significant improvement or insight you guys gained from using a data-driven approach.
Yeah, you know, this is a big area of sort of exploitation for us right at the moment because we use Autotask PSA and Data RMM and Rocket Cyber EDR and stuff. So we've got a whole suite of different things, and they're quite disparate, but we're pulling them together. We're kind of it's like working with a bit of glass, right? You know, it's fairly fluid, but you can't put it down because it'll go solid and you won't be able to do anything with it. So we're working with it constantly. But you know, one of the things that I always kind of chuckle to myself about is that on the service delivery side, my service delivery director will come to me and go, "Oh, we need more engineers," and I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "We're so busy." I'm like, "Okay." So I'm like, show me the data, tell me. You know, and honestly, I know he hates me for saying that, but obviously I'm going to ask him that question anyway. So we'll look at the data and I'll go, right, how many tickets have we got coming in each day? How many tickets can the guys do? And you start to drill into really rudimentary stuff. But when you start to look at the numbers, then you can start to affect them. And the one thing I always like to do is I go, well, what does 100% look like? So again, if in doubt, flat out, how hard can we go? How fast can we go? What can we achieve? Where does that get us versus what we're dealing with day on day versus the size of the challenge? And then look at it and say, well, you know, what does 80% look like? Because if I can get the guys working at 70, 80%, and I've got a 20 to 30% collar, then if I have a crisis, then I've got a load more resource ready to go without worrying about it. You know, so, and also if guys are on holiday or somebody phones in sick or something else happens, then I've got that extra collar. So we've worked all that out, and then I've gone, well, what does it mean though? So if we're working at 80% and we need to work at 100%, what does it mean? Does it mean that you just go to the engineers and go, hey, I need you to work harder today? Because if it does, that's not good enough, right? I need you to go to them and say, you're doing 8 tickets a day on average. I need you to do 10. And they go, all right, okay. So they know you've given them something, and again, dead simple, but you've given them something which is immediately measurable. You know, and I'm a big believer in that kind of, and this sounds crazy, but that whole sort of instant gratification thing. You know, it's a big issue with kids, and I've got a 9-year-old. It's a big issue with kids, isn't it, in terms of, you know, why they always want to play computer games, because get instant gratification. So again, you know, you give immediate feedback. You let people know if they're doing something right or wrong. It sounds super simple, but it's not something that a lot of people do. And if you drive off the back of data, then it enables you to make those decisions without any emotion. Because you go, well, that's what the data says. There's the reality. Now, how do we fix it? As opposed to going, yeah, but I asked you to do this and you said you were going to do it and you didn't. And I feel like you've let me down and you think I'm an idiot and all this kind of stuff. So remove all that emotion, and enable those relationships to sort of be respectful, but be based on a foundation of fact. And that's something that we're only really just kind of getting into now in terms of where the data is and what's it telling us, but then working out what we're going to do off the back of it. And it's absolutely key in terms of acquisitions, because it hopefully means, and again, we don't know for sure until we actually do it, you know, that we can affect change and efficiency sort of on day one of any business that we might acquire.
Awesome. Well, this is great. Great information. I could talk to you. I could keep talking to you for the next hour about this, but we'll have to get back on again, because we got to go back into some of these things. Very, very good stuff. Looking ahead, you know, this is your opportunity now to talk about what kind of managed service providers that you are interested in acquiring. So tell us about what should potential sellers know about what you're looking for and what they can expect when working with you guys.
Yeah, that you know, that's such an important point, isn't it? You know, I talk to lots of potential acquisition targets, and rightly or wrongly, I get a gut feel for a business quite early on, and it often comes from, well, not often, it always comes from the person or the persons. I guess, you know, our ideal is, you know, MSPs, southeast of the UK based. At this point, we will move a bit further afield in the future, but at the moment, we just want to kind of build out in the southeast. And again, that's just because, you know, whilst we do most things remotely, it's just nice to understand the culture of the businesses in the southeast, which we do. And even though the UK is nowhere near as the size of the US, you know, we do have cultural differences in businesses when you're trying to sell to them. And we're particularly good at dealing with businesses in the southeast. So southeast based, MSPs, owner, founder, managed and run, either looking, you know, either I guess got to a point where they go, we can't take it any further, or we want to retire, you know, those kinds of individuals. But a business that has good customer relationships, longevity of customer relationships, has good, solid recurring revenues, and who has probably made a little bit of a move towards that kind of digital transformation side, but, you know, maybe hasn't gone the whole hog, because that's a big area of upside for us that we can bring to that, and sell those solutions into. So we can really enhance the customer relationship in those environments. And that's always good, because you make an acquisition and everybody kind of looks at you sideways as if to say, who's the new person? You know, who's this kind of, it's like the, you know, opening the pub way down in the southeast, and it's, you know, the American Werewolf in London. Everybody turns and looks and goes, who's this? And we don't want to be that. You know, we want to be welcomed. So we want to be able to add value straight off the bat. So I'm not sure if that's that specific.
Is there a revenue, like a size, any kind of size requirements, like employee count, revenue?
Yeah, so I'm not too fussed about employee count. That's not an issue for us. Revenue, you know, we're looking, yeah, any business, I suppose we more look at EBITDA really. So anything that's around about $500,000 EBITDA, we're looking at those kinds of businesses, maybe a bit north of that, or a bit south of it, thereabouts.
Cool. And how do folks get in touch with you?
So they can reach me at jason@iglutech.com.
And that's IGLU. And I'll make sure, by the way, I'll put all that in the show notes. So go over to the YouTube channel. If you're watching this there, just click on the description.
Yeah, they can get me that way, or they can catch me on LinkedIn, or they can message me through our website, or they can go through the M&A concierge. You know, we're linked in with those guys. So, you know, I might be Scottish, but I promise I'm really approachable.
I love it. Well, I can't thank you enough for being here today and taking the time out of your very busy day to share with the MSP community. And for everyone watching, we thank you and tune in every Monday on the Kaseya YouTube channel for another episode of M&A Unpacked. And if you're not yet a member of the M&A Concierge platform that Jason just mentioned, make sure to apply today. This is an amazing platform and it's 100% free for both buyers and sellers. See you next time, everyone.